The $2 million prototype engine sat silent and dead under the harsh fluorescent lights of Bay 12, while a room full of panicked engineers stared at their biggest nightmare coming true in just 8 hours. The most important investor meeting in Atlantic Motors history would begin, and their revolutionary hybrid engine refused to start. Tom Phillips, the lead engineer, ran his hands through his hair in desperation. "It's like the computer can't see the engine at all," he muttered. After running every diagnostic test known to modern automotive science, that's when Mike Thompson, a 55-year-old night shift mechanic in grease-stained coveralls, quietly approached the million-dollar machine. The same Mike who'd been invisible to management for 18 years. The same Mike who was desperately trying to figure out how to pay for his daughter's MIT tuition on a $34,000 salary. "Mind if I listen to it?" Mike asked. What happened next would shock everyone on the factory floor and change the fate of American manufacturing forever. If this story of an underestimated worker fighting against a system that forgot the value of experience resonates with you, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories of everyday heroes who changed everything. The alarm clock's harsh buzz cut through the pre-dawn darkness at 4:30 a.m., but Mike Thompson was already awake, staring at the water-stained ceiling of his double-wide trailer. He'd been counting the cracks in that stain for 3 years now, ever since Linda died and sleep became something that happened to other people. The faint sound of Sarah practicing calculus problems drifted through the thin walls. She always rose early to study before school. Just like her mother used to do with her nursing textbooks, Mike rolled out of bed, his 55-year-old joints protesting the movement with familiar aches. His calloused hands reached automatically for the wedding ring on his left finger, Linda's simple gold band that he'd worn beside his own since the funeral. Some mornings he forgot she was gone for those first precious seconds, expecting to smell coffee brewing and hear her humming along to Sarah's pencil scratching. But the silence always reminded him. The small kitchen was exactly as he'd left it 12 hours ago, spotless because there was no one else to clean up after. He started the coffee maker, an ancient Mr. Coffee that Linda had bought at a garage sale 18 years back, and began preparing Sarah's breakfast: 2 pieces of whole wheat toast, scrambled eggs with just a touch of cheese, and fresh orange juice from the concentrate they bought in bulk at Costco. It was the same breakfast every morning, a routine that gave structure to their fractured world. "Morning, Dad." Sarah appeared in the doorway, her long auburn hair still damp from the shower, carrying her backpack stuffed with advanced placement textbooks and her graphing calculator. At 17, she was the perfect blend of her parents, Linda's graceful features and analytical mind, combined with Mike's steady determination and green eyes. She'd grown 3 inches in the past year, and Mike sometimes caught glimpses of the woman she was becoming: brilliant, passionate, and destined for things far beyond the boundaries of their riverside trailer park. "Morning, sweetheart. Sleep okay?" Mike slid the plate across the small Formica table, noting the shadows under her eyes. Sarah had been staying up late with college applications, scholarship essays, and the part-time job at Radio Shack that helped cover her AP exam fees. "Better than you, I think." She sat down and took a grateful sip of orange juice. "I heard you moving around at 2 a.m. again." Mike poured his coffee into the chipped mug that read, "World's Greatest Dad, a Father's Day gift from Sarah when she was 8. Just thinking, the Hendersons next door got a new baby. Little thing cries every few hours." Sarah gave him a look that said she wasn't buying the excuse, but she didn't push. They'd learned to navigate around each other's pain carefully, like dancers who knew each other's steps by heart. "I got something yesterday," Sarah said quietly. Reaching into her backpack, she pulled out a thick envelope with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology logo embossed in cardinal red and silver. "I was going to wait, but I can't keep it to myself anymore." Mike's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. They'd talked about college applications, had filled out the financial aid forms together, but seeing the actual letter made everything real in a way that stole his breath. "Open it," he whispered. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she tore the envelope. Her eyes scanned the letter once, twice, and then a smile broke across her face like sunrise. "I got in, Dad. Full academic consideration for the aeronautical engineering program. They want me. The pride that swelled in Mike's chest was immediately followed by a crushing weight of reality. He knew exactly what full academic consideration meant. It was university speak for, "You're smart enough." But can you pay? The aerospace program at MIT was prestigious, competitive, and expensive. Even with financial aid, they'd need at least $75,000 a year for tuition, books, and living expenses. Mike made $34,000 a year on the night shift at Atlantic Motors. After rent, groceries, Sarah's AP fees, and the medical bills that still trickled in from Linda's final months, they had maybe $800 in savings. $800 toward a $75,000 dream. That's incredible, Sarah. I'm so proud of you. He meant every word, even as his mind raced through impossible calculations. Maybe he could pick up overtime shifts. Maybe they could take out loans. Maybe he could sell the truck. Take the bus to work. Sarah was watching his face, and her smile faltered. Dad, I know it's expensive. I've been looking at community college programs too. And there's a really good engineering program at Wayne County Community College that... No, the word came out sharper than he intended. No, sweetheart. You're not settling for community college because of money. We'll figure it out. But even as he said it, Mike felt the familiar weight of inadequacy settling on his shoulders. Linda had always been the dreamer, the one who believed everything would work out. She'd encouraged Sarah's mathematics from the time she could hold a pencil. Buying secondhand textbooks and saving for months to afford the graphing calculator. Mike was the practical one, the one who worried about rent and groceries and keeping the lights on. After Linda died, he tried to be both parents, the dreamer and the worrier, the cheerleader and the disciplinarian. Most days he felt like he was failing at both jobs. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed his hand. We'll figure it out together. Dad, maybe I can get more scholarships or work more hours at Radio Shack. You concentrate on school and your studies. Let me worry about the money. Mike stood up and kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. I've got to get some sleep before work tonight. You need a ride to school. Marcus is picking me up. We're studying for the AP Physics exam during lunch. Sarah gathered her dishes and rinsed them in the sink, another piece of their morning routine. Dad, thank you for everything. Mom would be proud of both of us. After Sarah left for school, Mike tried to sleep, but the MIT letter seemed to glow from where she'd left it on the kitchen counter. He found himself calculating and recalculating, trying to make the numbers work, even if he picked up every available overtime shift, even if he took a second job during the day. The math was unforgiving. The truth was that Mike Thompson had been invisible for 18 years, and invisible men didn't get raises or promotions or second chances. They got older and more tired and eventually got replaced by younger workers who didn't require health insurance or vacation time. Atlantic Motors had been bleeding money for the past 5 years, ever since Tesla had started making electric vehicles seem not just possible, but inevitable. The company that had once employed 6,000 workers now limped along with barely 200, and rumors of layoffs circulated constantly through the factory floor. The older workers, men like Mike, who remembered when Atlantic Motors made the best luxury car engines in America, they were the most vulnerable. Too expensive to keep, too young to retire, too old to start over somewhere else. The night shift was where dreams went to die. Mike thought as he finally drifted off to sleep. It was where men like him kept the machines running while the important people slept soundly in their suburban homes. Never thinking about the invisible hands that made their success possible. But tonight would be different. Tonight, the invisible man would be seen. At 10:30 p.m., Mike arrived at Atlantic Motors for another midnight shift. The factory sprawled across 20 acres of industrial Detroit, a maze of corrugated metal buildings and smokestacks that had been belching steam and ambition since 1962. In the old days, the parking lot would have been full of American-made trucks and sedans. Now it was half empty, dotted with older vehicles held together by hope and determination. Mike parked his 15-year-old Ford F-150 next to Jerry Martinez's even older Chevy. Jerry was 64, a machinist who'd worked at Atlantic Motors for 41 years. He'd trained half the day shift supervisors, but they treated him like a relic, now someone who didn't understand computer-controlled machinery or just-in-time manufacturing principles. Evening. Mike. Jerry emerged from his truck with a thermos of coffee and a lunch pail that his wife Rosa had packed with the same care she'd shown for 4 decades. You hear about the big meeting tomorrow? What meeting? Board of directors flying in from New York, bringing some investors who might buy the whole operation. Jerry's weathered face was grim. Word is they're looking to modernize everything. Probably means more layoffs. Mike felt his stomach tighten. Layoffs meant the most expendable workers would go first, the older ones. The night shift. The men whose skills couldn't be easily quantified on a spreadsheet. They walked through the employee entrance together, past the bulletin board covered with safety reminders and productivity charts. The night shift supervisor, Dave Chen, was already at his desk, looking harried as he reviewed the evening's work orders. Thompson Martinez. Dave looked up from his clipboard. We've got a problem. The prototype in Bay 12 is acting up again. Day shift couldn't figure it out, and we need it running smooth for the investor tour tomorrow morning. Mike knew about the prototype, Atlantic Motors' last desperate attempt to compete in the electric vehicle market. $2 million of cutting-edge technology and engineering, designed to power a new line of hybrid luxury sedans. If it worked, it might save the company. If it didn't, they'd all be looking for new jobs by Christmas. What kind of problem? Jerry asked. Engine management system keeps throwing error codes. Won't start. Won't even turn over. The day shift engineers ran every diagnostic they could think of. Computer says everything should be fine, but the damn thing won't budge. Mike and Jerry exchanged glances. They'd seen this before, complicated systems that looked perfect on paper but had some small, overlooked problem that prevented them from working in the real world. The young engineers with their computer degrees often missed the simple solutions that experienced mechanics could spot immediately. Want us to take a look? Mike offered. Knock yourselves out, but don't mess with anything major. We can't afford to make it worse. Bay 12 was usually reserved for the most important projects, separated from the main factory floor by soundproof glass walls. The prototype sat under bright fluorescent lights like a mechanical patient in an operating room. It was beautiful. Mike had to admit, sleek silver body panels surrounding an engine that looked more like a sculpture than a machine. Hybrid electric and gasoline systems integrated so seamlessly that it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. 3 day shift engineers stood around the prototype, looking frustrated and defeated. They'd been there since 6 a.m., running diagnostic after diagnostic, replacing components that the computer said might be faulty. Nothing had worked. Any luck? Jerry asked. Tom Phillips, the lead engineer, shook his head. It's like the engine management system is in some kind of loop. Everything tests fine individually, but when we try to start the integrated system, it just dies. No error messages, no feedback. It's like the computer can't see the engine at all. Mike walked slowly around the prototype, his experienced eyes taking in details that the computer diagnostics might miss. The engine was a masterpiece of modern engineering, but it was still an engine: pistons and cylinders and fuel lines and electrical connections, just more sophisticated than the ones he'd been working on for 30 years. Mind if I listen to it? Mike asked. Tom shrugged. Be my guest. We've tried everything else. Mike leaned over the engine compartment and had Tom attempt to start the prototype. Instead of the healthy rumble of an engine turning over, there was only a faint electrical hum, followed by silence. But in that silence, Mike heard something the others had missed: a tiny clicking sound, almost inaudible, coming from somewhere deep in the engine compartment. Try it again, Mike said, closing his eyes and focusing entirely on the sound. There it was again. Click, pause, click. Pause, like a relay trying to engage but failing to make connection. Mike straightened up and walked to the other side of the engine compartment. The hybrid system was incredibly complex, with dozens of sensors and control modules communicating with each other through a web of electrical connections. But somewhere in all that complexity was something simple: a loose connection, a failed relay, a sensor that had worked its way free. Tom, you got a schematic of the electrical system? Sure. Tom pulled up the blueprint on his tablet and handed it to Mike. The schematic was intimidating, hundreds of components connected by lines that looked like abstract art. But Mike had learned to read these diagrams the same way Sarah read mathematical equations, recognizing patterns and relationships that told a story. This relay here, Mike pointed to a small component buried deep in the engine compartment. It controls communication between the hybrid battery system and the main engine management computer. If it's not making proper contact, the computer would think the engine doesn't exist. Tom frowned. We tested that relay. Computer says it's fine. Computer tests electrical continuity, but if the relay housing is cracked or the mounting bracket is loose, it might make contact when it's not under load, but fail when the engine tries to start. Mike reached into his toolbox and pulled out a small flashlight. He squeezed into the tight space around the engine compartment, following the wiring harness to the relay in question. It took 5 minutes of careful searching, but there it was, a hairline crack in the relay housing that would be invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Found it, Mike called out. Relay housing is cracked. Connection fails under load. I'll be damned, Jerry muttered. How'd you spot that? 30 years of listening to engines complain. Mike carefully removed the cracked relay and examined it under the light. This little $15 part was keeping your $2 million engine from starting. Tom was already on his phone, calling the parts department to find a replacement relay. They've got one in stock. I can have it here in 10 minutes. While they waited for the part, Mike noticed something else, a diagnostic port hidden behind a panel that most people would never think to check. It was an older style connection, the kind used in the prototype's early development phases, but usually removed before final assembly. You know about this port? Mike asked. Tom leaned in for a closer look. I've never seen that before. It's not on any of the schematics. Mike smiled. The port was a remnant from the prototype's development, probably left in place by some engineer who thought it might be useful for future diagnostics. The kind of detail that would be overlooked in the rush to finish the project, but invaluable for troubleshooting problems exactly like this one. If we connect to this port, we can probably get real-time data from the engine management system instead of relying on the standard diagnostic interface. Might help us catch problems before they shut down the whole system. When the replacement relay arrived, Mike installed it carefully, making sure the mounting bracket was secure and the electrical connections were tight. Then he connected his diagnostic equipment to the hidden port and nodded to Tom. Try starting it now. The prototype's engine came to life with a whisper-smooth purr that made everyone in Bay 12 smile. The hybrid system engaged seamlessly, electric motors and gasoline engine working in perfect harmony. All the diagnostic readings were green. All the error codes were cleared. Beautiful, Jerry said, and Mike nodded in agreement. But as Mike was packing up his tools, he noticed they weren't alone. A woman in an expensive business suit stood outside the glass walls of Bay 12 watching them work. She was probably in her late 40s, with silver-streaked blonde hair pulled back in a professional style and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing, even from a distance. Mike could tell she was someone important the way she stood, the way the other managers deferred to her presence. Who's that? Mike asked Tom quietly. Victoria Sterling, new CEO. She's been here about 8 months, trying to turn the company around. Tom's voice carried a mixture of respect and fear. Word is she's ruthless but fair. Saved her last company from bankruptcy by cutting costs and streamlining operations. Victoria Sterling was talking to Dave Chen now, pointing toward the prototype and asking questions. Dave was nodding enthusiastically, probably explaining how the night shift had solved the problem that had stumped the day shift engineers. Mike felt suddenly self-conscious. He'd spent 18 years being invisible, comfortable in his anonymity. Being noticed by the CEO was not necessarily a good thing, especially if she was looking for ways to cut costs and eliminate redundancies. We should get back to our regular assignments, Mike told Jerry quietly. But as they gathered their tools and prepared to leave Bay 12, Victoria Sterling walked through the door, up close. She was even more intimidating, not because she was cruel or harsh, but because she radiated the kind of focused intelligence that could see through any pretense or excuse. "Which one of you gentlemen fixed the prototype?" she asked. Tom pointed toward Mike. Mike Thompson figured out the problem. $15 relay was keeping the whole system from starting. Victoria's eyes focused on Mike with laser intensity. "How long have you been working here, Mr. Thompson?" 18 years, ma'am. Night shift maintenance." "And how long did it take you to diagnose the problem?" Mike felt every eye in Bay 12 watching him. "Maybe 10 minutes to find the actual problem. Another 5 to locate the diagnostic port." "The diagnostic port that's not on any of our schematics." "Yes, ma'am, left over from development. I think might be useful for future troubleshooting." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, studying Mike with an expression he couldn't read. Finally, she nodded to herself, as if she'd made some internal decision. "Mr. Thompson, I'd like to speak with you privately. Today, actually at 2 p.m. in my office. We have some things to discuss." After Victoria left, the other engineers gathered around Mike, full of questions and speculation, but Mike felt a cold knot of anxiety forming in his stomach. In his experience, when the CEO wanted to speak with a night shift maintenance worker privately, it was rarely good news. "What do you think she wants?" Jerry asked as they walked back to their regular assignments. "Probably to make sure I understand my place." Mike replied, "CEOs don't like it when the hired help shows up the engineering department." But even as he said it, Mike couldn't shake the memory of how Victoria Sterling had looked at him, not like a maintenance worker who'd overstepped his bounds, but like someone who had just solved a problem that everyone else had missed. For the first time in 18 years, Mike Thompson had been truly seen. Whether that was a blessing or a curse, he'd find out in a few hours. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of routine maintenance tasks, but Mike's mind kept returning to the meeting ahead. At 6 a.m., as the day shift began filtering in, he drove home through the gray Detroit dawn, past the abandoned lots and boarded-up houses that told the story of a city that had seen better days. Sarah was already gone early study group for AP Physics, but she'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Dad, I heard about the prototype Mrs. Chen called and said you were a hero. Can't wait to hear all about it. Love you." Mike smiled despite his exhaustion, in a world where he often felt like he was failing as a father. Moments like this reminded him that maybe he was doing something right. He tried to sleep, but his mind raced with possibilities and fears. The meeting with Victoria Sterling could mean anything: termination for overstepping boundaries, a reprimand for interfering with engineering work, or something else entirely. The uncertainty gnawed at him as he stared at the ceiling, counting cracks and trying to imagine what Linda would say about all this. At 1:30 p.m., Mike showered carefully, put on his best shirt, a blue Oxford that Sarah had given him for Father's Day, and drove to the factory. The administration building looked different in daylight, imposing and corporate rather than the familiar industrial landscape he knew from the night shift. Victoria Sterling's office occupied a corner of the 4th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the factory complex below. Mike could see Bay 12 from here, where the prototype sat like a mechanical monument to the previous night's crisis and triumph. Victoria stood behind her desk when Mike entered, wearing a charcoal business suit that probably cost more than Mike made in a month, but her expression was warm, almost relieved, as if she'd been looking forward to this conversation. "Mr. Thompson, thank you for coming. Please, sit down." The chairs in front of Victoria's desk were leather, the kind that probably adjusted to 12 different positions and cost more than Mike's truck. He sat carefully, acutely aware of the contrast between his work clothes and the executive surroundings. "I'll get straight to the point," Victoria said, settling into her own chair. "After watching you work last night, I've been doing some research. 18 years with Atlantic Motors, spotless safety record, consistently high-performance evaluations from your supervisors. More importantly, 3 different times you've solved critical problems that stumped our engineering teams." Mike shifted uncomfortably. "I just listened to what the machines were trying to tell me." "Ma'am, that's exactly what I'm talking about." Victoria leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Do you know what those investors said after they toured the facility this morning?" "No, ma'am." "Because they said Atlantic Motors' greatest asset isn't our equipment, or our patents, or our market position. It's our institutional knowledge, the expertise that can't be programmed into a computer or learned from a textbook. Victoria opened a folder on her desk and pulled out a formal document. They were specifically impressed by your diagnostic skills. Mike stared at the document, a formal job offer letter, with numbers that made his head spin. I'm offering you the position of Chief Technical Advisor, effective immediately, $95,000 a year, plus performance bonuses, plus health insurance that would actually cover your family's medical expenses if needed. You'd be working directly with our development teams, helping bridge the gap between theoretical engineering and practical application. Mike's vision blurred slightly as he processed the numbers. $95,000 a year, nearly 3 times his current salary. Enough to pay for Sarah's MIT education without taking on crushing debt. Enough to move out of the trailer park, maybe buy a small house with a yard. Enough to stop worrying about every grocery bill and utility payment. Ma'am, I don't know what to say. Say yes. Victoria smiled. You've earned this, Mr. Thompson. More than earned it. But even as the opportunity settled into Mike's mind, another thought was taking shape. There was something in Victoria's tone, something in the way she'd phrased the offer. That made him pause. Can I ask you something? Ma'am. Of course. What happens to the night shift when I leave? Jerry Martinez has been here 41 years. He knows more about precision machining than most of the day shift engineers. Dave Chen can diagnose hydraulic problems just by listening to them. These men, they're not just doing maintenance. They're keeping 40 years of institutional knowledge alive. Victoria's expression grew thoughtful. What are you suggesting? Mike took a deep breath, knowing he was about to either make the smartest decision of his life or blow the opportunity completely. I'm suggesting that maybe the problem isn't just that I'm underutilized. Maybe the problem is that the whole night shift is underutilized. These men have decades of experience that's just being wasted on routine maintenance. Go on. What if, instead of just promoting me, you created a program that tapped into all that experience, something that paired older workers with younger engineers, or with high school students who want to learn trades? Victoria was quiet for a long moment, studying Mike with an expression he couldn't read. Mr. Thompson, do you understand what you're risking? This kind of opportunity doesn't come twice. I could fill this position with any of a dozen candidates who wouldn't hesitate to accept. Yes, ma'am, I understand. But I also understand that Jerry Martinez taught me half of what I know about engines. Dave Chen showed me how to read hydraulic schematics when I was just starting out. If I take this promotion and leave them behind, I'm not just abandoning my crew, I'm abandoning the values that made me good at this job in the first place. Victoria stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the factory floor below. You know, when I took this job 8 months ago, everyone told me that Atlantic Motor's biggest problem was outdated equipment and inefficient processes. But after watching you work last night, I'm beginning to think our biggest problem is that we don't recognize the assets we already have. She turned back to Mike. Tell me more about this program you're envisioning. For the next hour, Mike outlined his idea as a mentorship program that paired experienced workers with young people wanting to learn trades. Skills-sharing sessions where night shift veterans could teach their knowledge to day shift engineers. An apprenticeship system that gave high school graduates an alternative to expensive college programs while preserving decades of institutional knowledge. It's not just about keeping older workers employed, Mike explained. It's about creating a bridge between generations of knowledge. The young engineers know the latest technology, but they don't necessarily understand how that technology behaves in the real world. The older workers understand real-world applications, but they might not be familiar with the newest innovations. Put them together, and you get solutions that neither group could develop alone. Victoria listened intently, occasionally asking questions about implementation details and cost projections. Mike found himself drawing on 18 years of observing how the factory actually worked versus how management thought it worked. This would require a significant investment, Victoria said finally. Training facilities, equipment, administrative overhead. The board would need to see a clear return on investment. The return is problem-solving capability, Mike replied. How much did that corrupted diagnostic system cost us in potential lost production time? How much do we spend on outside consultants when our own people could solve the problems if they were just given the chance? Victoria returned to her desk and made several notes on a legal pad. I'm intrigued by your proposal, Mr. Thompson, but I need something more concrete than a philosophical argument. If I'm going to ask the board to fund a program like this, I need data, projections, a detailed implementation plan. How long do I have? 2 weeks. And Mike. Victoria's use of his first name caught his attention. I'm still offering you the chief technical advisor position, regardless of whether this mentorship program moves forward. Don't sacrifice your family's future for an uncertain experiment. Mike stood up, the job offer letter still in his hands. Can I take a few days to think about it? Of course, but don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't wait indefinitely. That evening, Mike sat at his kitchen table with Sarah, explaining the offer and the choice he was facing. Sarah listened quietly, occasionally asking questions, her expression growing more thoughtful as she understood the implications. Dad, this is incredible. $95,000 a year, that's enough for my MIT tuition and more. You could even move us out of this trailer. Maybe get something with a real yard. But Mike could hear the hesitation in her voice. But you're not going to take it. Are you, not the way they're offering it? How do you know? Because you're your mother's husband and my father. You don't leave people behind when you have a chance to help them. Mike looked at his daughter, amazed once again by her insight. What am I thinking of proposing instead? Sarah spent the next hour listening as Mike explained his ideas for the mentorship program, watching her face light up with understanding and excitement. Dad, this is brilliant. You're not just thinking about getting promoted. You're thinking about changing how the whole company works. Mom would be so proud. You think so? I know so. She always said the best solutions are the ones that help everyone, not just yourself. Sarah paused, then smiled. Besides, I've been thinking about something myself. What's that? What if I didn't go to the expensive MIT program right away? What if I took a gap year and worked part-time to help with expenses if your mentorship program works? There might be opportunities for me to be involved teaching younger students, helping with program coordination. I could still pursue engineering, but maybe in a way that also helps other people achieve their dreams. Mike stared at his daughter, recognizing Linda's generous spirit and practical wisdom in Sarah's words. You'd really be willing to change your college plans. Dad, you taught me that the best dreams are the ones that include other people. If we can help Jerry and Dave and all those other workers while still making sure I get a good education, isn't that better than just looking out for ourselves? That night, Mike called Jerry Martinez to ask if he'd be interested in helping develop a proposal for the mentorship program. Jerry's response was immediate and enthusiastic. Mike, I've been hoping for something like this for years. I've got so much knowledge in my head, and when I retire, it's all going to disappear unless someone writes it down or passes it on. Over the next week, Mike spent his days researching successful apprenticeship programs, his evenings developing curriculum ideas, and his night shifts talking to other workers about their skills and interests. The response was overwhelming, not just from the older workers who saw a chance to share their knowledge, but from younger employees who wanted to learn from experienced mentors. Dave Chen, the shift supervisor, volunteered to teach project management skills he'd learned from decades of coordinating shift work. Even some of the day shift engineers expressed interest in learning practical applications from night shift veterans. But the most surprising support came from an unexpected source, Victoria Sterling's 18-year-old daughter, Amanda, who was volunteering at the factory for a high school internship program. When she heard about the mentorship proposal, she immediately grasped its potential. Mr. Thompson, she said, having insisted on the formal address despite being younger than Sarah, this mentorship program could be a model for other companies. Have you considered documenting the process so it could be replicated elsewhere? Mike hadn't considered that possibility, but Amanda's suggestion opened up an entirely new dimension to the proposal. If Atlantic Motors could develop a successful mentorship program, they could license the methodology to other manufacturers, creating a new revenue stream while solving industry-wide problems. By the end of the 2 weeks, Mike had a 40-page proposal that outlined not just the mentorship program, but a comprehensive approach to knowledge transfer and workforce development. The document was professional, detailed, and ambitious, far beyond anything he'd ever attempted before. But as he prepared to present his alternative to Victoria Sterling, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that he was gambling his family's future on an untested idea. The safe choice was to take the promotion, secure Sarah's education, and let someone else worry about the night shift workers who were facing layoffs. The question was whether Mike Thompson had the courage to choose the harder path, knowing that failure would mean losing everything he'd worked 18 years to achieve. The answer would come tomorrow, in Victoria Sterling's office, when Mike would either transform his life or throw away the best opportunity he'd ever been offered. Mike's hands were steady as he placed the 40-page proposal on Victoria Sterling's desk, but his heart was hammering against his ribs. 2 weeks of research, planning, and soul-searching had led to this moment, the decision that would either transform Atlantic Motors or end his career in spectacular failure. Victoria picked up the document, noting its weight and professional binding. "This is considerably more than I expected. Mr. Thompson, I wanted to be thorough. Ma'am." She opened to the first page and began reading. Mike sat in silence, watching her expression for any hint of reaction. Victoria was known for her poker face in business negotiations, but after several minutes, he caught the slight raise of her eyebrows that suggested genuine surprise. "You've outlined a 3-phase implementation plan," she said without looking up, "starting with a pilot program of 12 mentor-apprentice pairs, expanding to facility-wide deployment, and eventually licensing the methodology to other manufacturers." She glanced at him over the document. "That's quite ambitious for someone who describes himself as just a mechanic." "I had help. Sarah assisted with the research and formatting. Jerry Martinez provided technical expertise for the curriculum development. Amanda, your daughter, suggested the licensing component." "Amanda helped with this." Victoria's tone carried a mixture of pride and surprise. "She visited the factory last week and immediately understood the program's potential. Very bright young lady. Ma'am?" Victoria continued reading, occasionally making notes in the margins. Mike tried to interpret her body language the way she leaned forward during certain sections, the slight nod when she reached his cost-benefit analysis, the pause when she encountered the detailed implementation timeline. "Your financial projections are conservative," she said finally. "I'd rather under-promise and over-deliver than the reverse." "Smart approach." Victoria closed the proposal and leaned back in her chair. "This is impressive work, Mike, truly impressive, but I have to ask why. Why risk a guaranteed promotion for an experimental program that might never get approved?" Mike had been preparing for this question for 2 weeks, but now that it was here, the answer came from somewhere deeper than preparation. "Because 18 years ago, when I was new and scared and didn't know a timing belt from a fuel injector, Jerry Martinez spent his lunch breaks teaching me to read engine diagnostics. Because Dave Chen showed me how to listen to a machine's complaints instead of just following repair protocols. Because when Linda was sick and I needed extra shifts for medical bills, these men covered for me even though it meant extra work for them." Mike paused, collecting his thoughts. "These men didn't just teach me technical skills. They taught me that knowledge isn't worth anything unless you share it, that the best solutions come from people working together, not competing against each other. And you believe this mentorship program can institutionalize that kind of knowledge sharing? I believe it can preserve it, right now, when Jerry retires. 41 years of precision machining expertise walks out the door with him. When Dave gets laid off, we lose 3 decades of hydraulic systems knowledge. We're throwing away institutional wisdom because we don't have a system for capturing and transferring it." Victoria opened the proposal again, flipping to a section near the back. "Your pilot program pairs older workers with high school students rather than existing employees. Why that choice? 2 reasons. First, high school students don't have preconceived notions about how things should work. They're willing to learn from experience as well as textbooks. Second, we're creating pathways for young people who might not be able to afford college but still want skilled careers. Like your daughter." The question caught Mike off guard. Sarah's situation is different. Is it? Victoria's voice carried a challenge. Sarah is 17, academically gifted, and passionate about engineering, but she's also practical enough to understand financial constraints. I've spoken with her several times during her visits here. She strikes me as someone who would thrive in a program that combines practical skills with academic pursuits. Mike felt a moment of protective instinct. Sarah has been accepted to MIT's aerospace program. She's worked too hard to settle for something less. Who says she'd be settling? Victoria's voice carried a challenge. What if this mentorship program included tracks for students interested in combining technical skills with other pursuits, engineering students who want practical experience, business students who want to understand manufacturing, even students who want to learn about acoustics and sound engineering? The idea was intriguing, but Mike remained cautious. That would significantly complicate the program structure. It would also significantly expand its impact and appeal. Victoria made more notes in the margins. Mike, I'm going to be direct with you. This proposal is exactly the kind of innovative thinking Atlantic Motors needs, but it's also risky, expensive, and unproven. The board will have legitimate concerns about return on investment. What kind of concerns? Cost. Primarily, even your conservative projections require a significant upfront investment, training facilities, equipment, administrative overhead, mentor compensation. The board will want to know why we should spend money on experimental programs when we could use those resources to modernize equipment or reduce debt. Mike had anticipated this objection. Because modern equipment doesn't solve problems, people solve problems. The prototype crisis 2 weeks ago is a perfect example. We had the most advanced diagnostic equipment available, but it took human insight to identify the actual issue. That's a compelling argument, but it's still anecdotal. The board will want data, metrics, quantifiable outcomes, which is why I'm proposing a small pilot program first, 12 mentor-apprentice pairs, minimal infrastructure requirements, carefully measured results. If it works, we expand it. If it doesn't, we've learned something valuable with limited investment. Victoria was quiet for several minutes, reading through the proposal's implementation timeline. Finally, she looked up at Mike with an expression he couldn't quite read. I'm going to make you an offer, Mr. Thompson, but it's not the offer I originally had in mind. Mike's pulse quickened. Ma'am, I want you to develop this mentorship program as a full-time position. Director of Workforce Development, salary commensurate with program development responsibilities, complete autonomy over curriculum design and mentor selection. You'd report directly to me, with authority to coordinate across all departments. That sounds like a bigger risk and a bigger opportunity than the Chief Technical Advisor position. Yes. Are you prepared for that level of responsibility? Mike thought about Sarah's MIT acceptance letter, still tucked in his wallet like a talisman, about Jerry Martinez's decades of expertise facing obsolescence, about Dave Chen counting down to pension eligibility because he feared layoffs, about all the young people in Detroit who wanted skilled careers but couldn't afford traditional education. Yes, ma'am, I'm prepared. Good. Because there are conditions. Victoria's tone became businesslike. First, the pilot program has 6 months to demonstrate measurable results. If it doesn't show clear benefits by then, we terminate it and you return to your previous position. Second, you'll be working with our HR department to ensure compliance with all labor regulations and union agreements. Third, you'll present quarterly progress reports to the board of directors. I understand. Do you? Mike, this isn't just about creating a nice program for older workers. This is about proving that Atlantic Motors can innovate in ways that go beyond new products or manufacturing processes. If this mentorship program succeeds, it could become a model for the entire industry. If it fails, it reflects on both of us. The weight of responsibility was daunting, but Mike found himself energized rather than intimidated. When do we start? Immediately. I'm calling an all-hands meeting for tomorrow morning to announce the program and solicit applications for both mentors and apprentices. I want you there to explain the vision and answer questions. As Mike prepared to leave Victoria's office, she called his name one more time. Mike, About Sarah's college plans. Has she considered applying for our new educational partnership program? What partnership program? Victoria smiled. The one we're going to create as part of this mentorship initiative. Partnerships with local colleges and universities that allow students to combine traditional academics with practical experience. Sarah could pursue her engineering degree while also learning manufacturing processes, quality control, or project management. Full tuition assistance for program participants. Mike stared at Victoria, understanding that she'd been thinking several steps ahead throughout their entire conversation. You planned this all along. I planned to help talented people achieve their potential while solving business problems. The details were negotiable. Victoria extended her hand. Welcome to your new career, Mr. Thompson. I hope you're ready to change how this company thinks about its most valuable asset. That evening, Mike sat with Sarah at their kitchen table. The mentorship program contract spread between them alongside her MIT acceptance letter. Both documents represented futures, one certain but limited, the other uncertain but expansive. So I could study engineering and learn manufacturing at the same time, Sarah asked, tracing the partnership program details with her finger. If the program gets approved and the partnerships get established. Yes. But Sarah, there are no guarantees. This could all fall apart in 6 months. Sarah was quiet for a moment, studying both documents. Dad, do you remember what Mom used to say about taking risks? That the biggest risk is not taking any risks at all. She also used to say that the best opportunities are the ones that help other people while helping yourself. Sarah looked up at Mike with Linda's determined expression. I want to be part of this program, not just as a participant, but as someone who helps make it work. You'd be willing to give up MIT. I'd be willing to defer MIT to help create something that could help dozens of other students if this mentorship program works. It could change how people think about education and careers. That's worth postponing my own plans for. That night, Mike called Jerry Martinez and Dave Chen to share the news. Both men were eager to participate as mentors, and both had specific ideas about young people they wanted to work with. You know what this means, don't you? Jerry said over the phone. This means everything we've learned over the past 40 years doesn't die with us. It gets passed on to people who will use it to solve problems we haven't even thought of yet. Dave was more direct. Mike, you just gave us all a second chance, a chance to matter again, to contribute something beyond just keeping the lights on. I don't know how to thank you for that. As Mike hung up the phone, he realized that his written proposal had become something much larger than he'd originally envisioned. It wasn't just about preserving institutional knowledge or creating job opportunities for young people. It was about proving that experience and wisdom had value in a world that increasingly favored youth and innovation over depth and understanding. The mentorship program would either validate that belief or prove it naive. Either way, Mike Thompson was about to find out what happened when an invisible man stepped fully into the light and tried to change the world around him. The announcement of the Atlantic Motors Mentorship Program generated more interest than anyone had anticipated. Within 48 hours of Victoria's all-hands meeting, they had received 47 applications from potential mentors, not just from Atlantic Motors employees, but from retired workers who wanted to share their knowledge and even competitors' employees who were intrigued by the program's innovative approach. The apprentice applications were even more overwhelming. High school guidance counselors from across Detroit had spread word about the program, and applications poured in from students who saw an alternative to expensive college programs or dead-end minimum wage jobs. Mike found himself working 16-hour days, reviewing applications, conducting interviews, and developing curriculum frameworks with Jerry Martinez and Dave Chen. His makeshift office in a converted storage room became the unofficial headquarters for the most ambitious workforce development experiment in Atlantic Motors history. Look at this, Sarah said, entering his office with a stack of apprentice applications. She had become an unofficial coordinator for the program, helping with paperwork and serving as a liaison between Mike and the applicant families. Maria Santos, 17, straight A student. But her family can't afford college. She's bilingual and has been working part-time in her uncle's auto repair shop since she was 14. Mike reviewed Maria's application. noting her mechanical aptitude scores and the passionate essay about wanting to combine engineering knowledge with hands-on skills. She'd be perfect for Jerry's precision machining track. There's more, Sarah continued. Marcus Williams, no relation to our Marcus, he's 18. Just graduated from Cass Technical High School. His father was laid off from Ford 3 years ago, and Marcus has been helping support the family by working at a parts warehouse. He wants to learn hydraulic systems. The diversity of applications was remarkable. Young women interested in welding and fabrication. Recent immigrants who brought different perspectives on problem solving. Even college graduates who realized they wanted practical skills to complement their theoretical knowledge. But the most intriguing application came from an unexpected source, Amanda Sterling, Victoria's daughter. I know this might seem like nepotism, Amanda said during her interview with Mike in the Mentor Selection Committee, but I'm genuinely interested in manufacturing processes, and I think this program represents the future of workforce development. Jerry Martinez, who was part of the interview panel, leaned forward. What makes you think that? Because it recognizes that knowledge flows in both directions? Amanda replied, experienced workers have wisdom that can't be taught in classrooms, but young people bring fresh perspectives and familiarity with new technologies. The combination creates innovation that neither group could achieve alone. Dave Chen nodded approvingly. What would you want to learn? Project coordination and quality control systems. I'm interested in how manufacturing processes can be optimized without losing the human element that makes products reliable and durable. After Amanda left, the committee discussed her application. Jerry was enthusiastic. She gets it. She understands that this isn't just about job training, it's about preserving and evolving industrial knowledge. Dave agreed. Plus, having the CEO's daughter in the program sends a message that this isn't just charity for disadvantaged kids. It's valuable education for anyone who wants to understand how things actually get made. Mike made the decision to accept Amanda, but with conditions. She gets no special treatment because of who her mother is. She works the same hours, meets the same standards, and earns respect through performance, not connections. As the pilot program took shape, Mike began to understand the magnitude of what they were attempting. The 12 mentor-apprentice pairs represented not just individual relationships, but a fundamental shift in how Atlantic Motors approached human capital development. Jerry Martinez was paired with Maria Santos, creating a dynamic that combined his 4 decades of precision machining experience with her mathematical aptitude and bilingual communication skills. Within the first week, they had identified 3 inefficiencies in the production line that had been overlooked by the engineering department. Dave Chen worked with Marcus Williams on hydraulic systems, discovering that Marcus had an intuitive understanding of fluid dynamics that complemented Dave's practical experience. Together, they developed a diagnostic protocol that could predict hydraulic failures weeks before they occurred. Amanda Sterling was assigned to work with Patricia Walsh, a 59-year-old quality control supervisor who had been with Atlantic Motors for 35 years. Patricia initially resented being paired with the boss's daughter, but Amanda's genuine enthusiasm and willingness to learn gradually won her over. The girl actually listens, Patricia told Mike during a weekly check-in. She doesn't just nod and pretend to understand, she asks real questions and takes notes. Yesterday, she suggested a modification to our inspection protocol that could save us 20 minutes per unit without compromising quality. But it was Sarah's participation that proved most transformative. She had chosen to work with Tom Phillips, the lead engineer who had struggled with the prototype diagnosis. Their partnership created a unique dynamic, Sarah's theoretical knowledge combined with Tom's practical experience, bridged by her growing understanding of manufacturing processes. She's teaching me to think differently about problem solving, Tom told Mike. Her mathematical approach to diagnostics is helping me understand why certain solutions work while others don't, and I'm showing her how theoretical principles play out in real-world applications. 3 months into the pilot program, the results were undeniable. Production efficiency had increased by 18%, equipment downtime had decreased by 22%, and worker satisfaction scores had reached their highest levels in 5 years. But more importantly, The mentor-apprentice pairs were generating innovations that neither the experienced workers nor the young apprentices could have developed independently. Victoria Sterling was pleased but cautious. The numbers are impressive, Mike, but I need to prepare the board for what comes next. The pilot program has demonstrated clear value, but scaling it up will require significant investment. What kind of investment? Dedicated training facilities, expanded curriculum development, additional administrative staff. We're talking about a commitment of at least $2 million over 3 years. Mike felt the familiar weight of responsibility. And if the board doesn't approve the expansion, then we maintain the pilot program at its current size and look for alternative funding sources. But Mike, there's something else you need to know. Victoria's tone carried a warning that made Mike's stomach tighten. What is it? We've received inquiries from 3 major automotive manufacturers about licensing our mentorship methodology. The interest is flattering, but it's also created some complications. What kind of complications? Victoria walked to her window, looking down at the factory floor where mentor-apprentice pairs were working together on various projects. Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis have all expressed interest in implementing similar programs. But they're not just interested in licensing our methodology. They're interested in acquiring our most experienced mentors. Mike felt a chill of understanding. They want to poach our people. They want to hire Jerry Martinez as a consultant to develop precision machining programs. They've offered Dave Chen a position as regional training coordinator. They're systematically targeting every mentor in our pilot program with offers that are difficult to refuse. The irony was devastating. The mentorship program's success had made Atlantic Motors' most valuable employees more attractive to competitors. Instead of preserving institutional knowledge, they might be accelerating its departure. How many have accepted offers? Mike asked. None yet. But Jerry is seriously considering Ford's proposal. They're offering him almost double his current salary, plus consulting fees. Dave is tempted by GM's training coordinator position. Even Patricia Walsh has received inquiries about quality control consulting. Mike sat down heavily, understanding the trap they had inadvertently created. By demonstrating the value of experienced workers, they had made those workers valuable to companies with deeper pockets and broader opportunities. There has to be a way to protect the program and the people who've invested in it. There might be, Victoria said, returning to her desk, but it would require a decision that could fundamentally change Atlantic Motors' future. What kind of decision? Victoria pulled out a document that Mike recognized as a corporate strategic plan. The board is considering a radical restructuring. Instead of competing with other manufacturers for market share, we could become the leading provider of workforce development services to the automotive industry. Mike studied the plan, noting its ambitious scope and significant risks. You want to transform Atlantic Motors from a manufacturing company into an education company. I want to transform us into a company that recognizes our true competitive advantage, our people and their knowledge. Instead of trying to outproduce companies with lower labor costs, we become the company that other manufacturers come to when they need skilled workers and innovative solutions. The concept was intriguing but daunting. What would that mean for our current production operations? We'd maintain core manufacturing capabilities, but we'd also establish the Atlantic Motors Institute, a comprehensive workforce development center that provides training, consulting, and knowledge transfer services to companies across multiple industries. Mike looked at the strategic plan, recognizing the vision but also understanding the enormous risks involved. This is a complete transformation of the company's identity. Yes, and it would require the board to approve an investment of at least $10 million over 5 years. The mentorship program would be just the beginning we'd need to develop comprehensive curricula, build state-of-the-art training facilities, and recruit the best industrial educators in the country. And if it fails, then Atlantic Motors probably doesn't survive anyway. The automotive industry is changing too rapidly for us to compete using traditional approaches. Our choice isn't between taking risks and playing it safe. Our choice is between taking smart risks and taking desperate risks. Mike spent the next hour reviewing the strategic plan, impressed by its comprehensiveness and terrified by its ambition. The proposal would transform Atlantic Motors from a regional manufacturing company into a national leader in workforce development. But it would also bet the company's entire future on the belief that industrial knowledge and human expertise were more valuable than automated production capabilities. "What do you need from me?" Mike asked finally. "I need you to present the mentorship program's results to the board next week. Not just the statistics, but the human stories, the innovations that mentor-apprentice pairs have developed, the career transformations they've experienced, the institutional knowledge that's been preserved and enhanced, and then, and then we find out whether Atlantic Motors has the courage to bet its future on its people." As Mike prepared to leave Victoria's office, she handed him one more document, a contract amendment that would make him director of the Atlantic Motors Institute if the board approved the expansion. "Mike, I need you to understand what we're asking you to do. You'd be responsible for developing workforce programs that could affect thousands of workers across multiple industries. The success or failure of this initiative would determine not just your career, but the future of everyone who believes in the value of human knowledge and experience." Mike looked at the contract, then at the strategic plan, then out the window at the factory floor, where mentor-apprentice pairs were continuing to learn from each other, despite the uncertainty surrounding their future. "When is the board meeting?" "Friday morning. You'll have 1 hour to convince 12 directors that investing in people is more profitable than investing in automation." Mike thought about Sarah's decision to defer MIT, about Jerry Martinez's willingness to share 4 decades of expertise, about all the young apprentices who had trusted him with their career dreams. "I'll be ready," he said. He started, but as he drove home that evening, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to face the most important presentation of his life, one that would either validate everything he believed about the value of human knowledge or prove that idealism had no place in modern business. The board meeting was 5 days away. In that time, Mike would have to prepare not just a presentation, but a compelling argument for why a mid-sized manufacturing company should bet its entire future on the belief that people mattered more than profits. The weekend before the board presentation, Mike's trailer became an unlikely command center for the most important proposal in Atlantic Motors history. Sarah had transformed the small dining area into a research station, surrounded by financial projections, success stories from mentor-apprentice pairs, and industry reports about workforce development trends. "Dad, look at this," Sarah said, pointing to a graph on her laptop screen. "Companies that invest in comprehensive workforce development programs see an average return on investment of 300% over 5 years, but more importantly, they maintain competitive advantages that can't be easily replicated by competitors." Jerry Martinez had joined them for the weekend planning session, bringing his own insights about what the board would want to hear. "The key is showing them that this isn't just about being nice to older workers," Jerry said. "This is about capturing and transferring knowledge that took decades to develop. When I retire, if my knowledge hasn't been passed on, Atlantic Motors loses a competitive capability that can't be rebuilt quickly." Amanda Sterling had contributed research about successful workforce development programs in other industries, including partnerships between manufacturing companies and educational institutions that had generated both revenue and innovation. "The German apprenticeship model has been incredibly successful," Amanda explained. "Companies that participate in comprehensive training programs not only develop skilled workers, they also generate intellectual property and innovative solutions that become competitive advantages." But it was Dave Chen who provided the most compelling argument for the board presentation. "Mike, you need to talk about national competitiveness. When American companies lose institutional knowledge, we lose our ability to innovate and solve complex problems. This isn't just about Atlantic Motors. This is about whether American manufacturing can compete with countries that invest heavily in workforce development." As Sunday evening approached, Mike had developed a presentation that combined hard financial data with compelling human stories. The proposal requested a $10 million investment over 5 years, but projected returns that included not just cost savings and productivity improvements, but also revenue generation through consulting services and intellectual property development. "The numbers work," Sarah said. reviewing the final financial projections. But Dad, you need to remember that this board has probably heard dozens of proposals that promise transformational results. What makes this different? Mike looked around at the people who had helped him prepare Jerry with his 4 decades of manufacturing experience. Amanda with her fresh perspective on industrial innovation. Sarah with her analytical mind and passionate commitment to meaningful work. They represented exactly what the mentorship program was designed to create: collaboration between different generations and perspectives that generated solutions none of them could have developed alone. What makes this different, Mike said slowly, is that we're not asking them to invest in equipment or technology that might become obsolete. We're asking them to invest in human potential that gets stronger and more valuable over time. Monday morning brought unexpected news. Victoria Sterling called Mike into her office with an expression that mixed excitement and concern. "Mike, we've received a formal offer to purchase Atlantic Motors," she said without preamble. "Consolidated Automotive Solutions wants to acquire us for $150 million. Mike felt his stomach drop. What does that mean for the mentorship program? It means we have to accelerate our timeline. The board meeting has been moved to Wednesday morning. Consolidated's representatives will be there to present their acquisition proposal immediately after your workforce development presentation." "What's Consolidated's position on the mentorship program?" Victoria's expression was grim. "They see it as an unnecessary expense that would be eliminated immediately after acquisition. Their business model is based on automated production and minimal labor costs. Everything we've worked to build would disappear within 60 days. The stakes couldn't be higher." Mike's presentation would determine not just the future of the mentorship program, but whether Atlantic Motors would remain an independent company committed to workforce development or become another acquisition target for companies that viewed workers as expendable resources. "Victoria, I need to ask you something directly. If the board chooses acquisition over expansion, what happens to you?" "I've been offered a consulting contract with Consolidated, but it would require me to oversee the elimination of approximately 40% of Atlantic Motors' current workforce." Victoria's voice was steady, but Mike could see the conflict in her eyes. "I'd make more money in 1 year than I've made in the past 5, but I'd be destroying everything we've worked to build. And if the board chooses expansion over acquisition, then we bet the company's future on our ability to transform workforce development into a profitable business model. If we succeed, Atlantic Motors becomes a national leader in industrial education. If we fail, we probably end up bankrupt within 3 years." Mike looked at Victoria, understanding that she was facing the same impossible choice he had confronted months earlier: personal success versus collective responsibility. "What are you going to recommend to the board?" "I'm going to present both options objectively and let them decide. But Mike, I need you to understand that your presentation isn't just about the mentorship program anymore. You're arguing for a completely different vision of what American manufacturing can become." As Mike left Victoria's office, he carried with him the knowledge that Wednesday morning would determine not just his own future, but the future of everyone who believed that human knowledge and experience were worth preserving and developing. The invisible mechanic was about to make the most visible argument of his life, that in an age of automation and globalization, investing in people was not just morally right, but economically essential. The board presentation was 48 hours away. In that time, Mike Thompson would either convince 12 corporate directors to bet their company's future on human potential, or watch everything he'd worked to build disappear into the corporate machinery of cost reduction and profit maximization. Either way, the invisible man would finally be seen and judged by the people who controlled his world. The Atlantic Motors boardroom had never seen anything like the presentation that began at 9:00 a.m. on that crisp Wednesday morning. Mike Thompson stood at the head of the polished mahogany table, facing 12 directors whose expressions ranged from skeptical to openly hostile. Behind him, a projection screen displayed the first slide of what would either be the most important presentation of his life or his professional suicide note. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mike began, his voice steady despite the career-ending stakes. "6 months ago, you hired me to fix a $2 million prototype. Today, I'm here to show you how we can fix American manufacturing, Board Chairman Robert Hartwell. No relation to the consulting firm that had recommended terminating similar programs at other companies, leaned forward with barely contained irritation. Mr. Thompson, we're here to discuss your workforce development program, not to receive lectures about American industry. With respect, sir, they're the same thing. Mike clicked to the next slide, which showed productivity metrics from the mentorship program. The pilot program has generated measurable benefits that exceed our most optimistic projections. But more importantly, it has created something that can't be bought, sold, or replicated through conventional means, a culture of knowledge sharing that transforms how companies think about their most valuable assets. Director Margaret Chen, who oversaw human resources across Atlantic Motors facilities, raised her hand. Mr. Thompson, your results are impressive, but Consolidated Automotive's acquisition offer provides immediate returns to shareholders rather than speculative long-term benefits. Why should we continue investing in an experimental program when we could provide guaranteed profits today? Mike had been preparing for this question all weekend, because guaranteed profits today often mean guaranteed problems tomorrow. Consolidated's business model is based on eliminating the institutional knowledge that took us 60 years to develop. They'll save money in the short term by laying off experienced workers, but they'll lose capabilities that can't be easily rebuilt. He clicked to a new slide showing comparative data from companies that had been acquired by Consolidated. In the past 5 years, Consolidated has acquired 7 manufacturing facilities. Average workforce reduction, 43%. Average time from acquisition to profitability decline 18 months. They strip away experienced workers to reduce costs, then struggle to maintain quality and innovation when problems arise that require institutional knowledge to solve. Director James Morrison, representing the pension fund that was Atlantic Motors' largest institutional investor, spoke next. These are concerning statistics, Mr. Thompson, but they're also irrelevant if we're selling the company. Our responsibility is to maximize shareholder value, not to preserve employment or industrial knowledge. I understand your fiduciary responsibility, Mike replied, advancing to a slide that would either make or break his entire argument. But what if I could show you that preserving and developing our workforce creates more shareholder value than selling to Consolidated ever could? The boardroom fell silent. Mike took a deep breath and revealed the information that Victoria Sterling had helped him compile over the weekend, information that would transform the entire discussion. 3 days ago, we received formal inquiries from the Department of Defense about establishing a national center for advanced manufacturing training. The Pentagon is concerned about America's declining capability to produce sophisticated defense systems domestically. They're prepared to offer a $25 million contract over 5 years to develop comprehensive workforce training programs for defense contractors. Chairman Hartwell's expression shifted from skeptical to intensely interested. Continue. Additionally, we've received preliminary inquiries from Ford, General Motors, Boeing, and Lockheed Martin about licensing our mentorship methodology for their facilities. Conservative projections suggest licensing revenue of $8 to $12 million annually within 3 years. Mike clicked to the next slide, revealing financial projections that made several board members sit up straighter. If we sell to Consolidated, shareholders receive a one-time payment of $150 million. If we develop the Atlantic Motors Institute for Workforce Excellence, projections show company valuation reaching $400 million within 5 years, plus ongoing revenue streams that could support dividend payments substantially higher than current levels. Director Patricia Walsh, who had been quiet throughout the presentation, finally spoke. Mr. Thompson, these projections assume successful implementation of an unproven business model. What if the workforce development program fails to generate projected revenues? Then we'll have spent 5 years proving that investing in people creates sustainable competitive advantages, even if we don't achieve financial projections. But ma'am, I'd like to show you something that goes beyond financial returns. Mike nodded toward the back of the boardroom, where Jerry Martinez, Sarah Thompson, and Amanda Sterling entered carrying a device that immediately captured everyone's attention. It was a precision measurement tool that looked unlike anything the board members had ever seen. Sleek, efficient, and obviously innovative. This is the Martinez-Santos Precision Calibrator, Mike announced, developed by Jerry Martinez and his apprentice, Maria Santos, as part of the mentorship program. It performs measurements that previously required 3 separate instruments, costs 60% less than comparable equipment, and has generated inquiries from tool manufacturers across the country. Jerry stepped forward, his weathered hands steady as he demonstrated the device. Directors, this tool exists because Maria Santos brought fresh mathematical approaches to problems I'd been solving intuitively for 40 years. Neither of us could have developed it alone. It required the combination of experience and innovation that the mentorship program is designed to create. Maria Santos, now 18 and confident in ways that 6 months of mentorship had developed, addressed the board directly. Mr. Martinez taught me that precision isn't just about measurements. It's about understanding how small variations affect entire systems. I taught him how mathematical modeling can predict those variations before they occur. Together, we created something that's already attracted patent interest from 3 major companies. Amanda Sterling spoke next, her presentation skills reflecting both her mother's business acumen and her own developing expertise. The mentorship program isn't just preserving institutional knowledge, it's evolving it. We have 12 mentor-apprentice pairs, and they've generated 17 potential patent applications in 6 months. The intellectual property value alone justifies the program's costs, but it was Sarah Thompson who delivered the presentation's most powerful moment. She stepped forward carrying a laptop that displayed a comprehensive analysis of American manufacturing competitiveness. Directors, I've spent the past month analyzing why American manufacturing companies struggle to compete with international corporations. The answer isn't labor costs or regulatory environments, it's institutional knowledge retention. Countries like Germany and Japan invest heavily in apprenticeship programs that preserve and transfer industrial expertise across generations. American companies typically treat workforce knowledge as a disposable commodity. Sarah clicked through slides that showed compelling international comparisons. German manufacturing companies that participate in comprehensive apprenticeship programs maintain competitive advantages for decades. Japanese corporations that invest in knowledge transfer systems consistently outperform competitors in innovation and quality metrics. American companies that have implemented similar programs, and there are very few, show productivity improvements that far exceed companies relying solely on automation and cost reduction. She paused, looking directly at Chairman Hartwell. The Atlantic Motors mentorship program isn't just about helping our company compete. It's about proving that American manufacturing can develop sustainable competitive advantages based on human knowledge and innovation, rather than just low costs and high technology. The boardroom was quiet for several minutes as directors absorbed the implications of what they'd heard. Finally, Director Morrison spoke. Mr. Thompson, these are impressive presentations, but I need to understand the risks. What happens if we reject Consolidated's acquisition offer and the workforce development program fails to meet projections? Mike had been dreading this question, but he answered it directly. Then Atlantic Motors probably goes bankrupt. Most of us lose our jobs, and American manufacturing loses another company that believed in investing in people rather than just maximizing short-term profits. And you're willing to accept that risk. Mike looked around the boardroom at faces that would determine not just his own future, but the future of everyone who had believed in the possibility that companies could succeed by empowering their workers rather than just managing them as costs to be minimized. I'm willing to accept that risk because the alternative is guaranteed failure. Selling to Consolidated means giving up everything that makes Atlantic Motors valuable in exchange for short-term financial returns. The mentorship program has proven that investing in people creates capabilities that can't be easily replicated by competitors. That's the foundation for sustainable competitive advantage. Chairman Hartwell consulted his notes, then looked up with an expression that Mike couldn't read. Mr. Thompson, the board will now deliberate on your proposal versus Consolidated's acquisition offer. We'll reconvene in 1 hour with our decision. As the board members filed out for their private discussion, Mike found himself alone in the corridor with Victoria Sterling. She looked as nervous as he felt. understanding that the next hour would determine whether her vision of transformed corporate leadership would survive or disappear into the machinery of conventional business thinking. "How do you think it went?" Mike asked. "I think you gave them a choice between two completely different visions of what Atlantic Motors can become," Victoria replied. "One vision prioritizes immediate financial returns over long-term capability development. The other vision bets the company's future on the belief that human knowledge and innovation create more value than cost reduction and automation." "And which vision do you think they'll choose?" Victoria looked through the boardroom windows at the factory floor below, where mentor-apprentice pairs were continuing their work despite the uncertainty surrounding their future. "I think they'll choose based on whether they believe American manufacturing can compete by developing human potential, or whether they think our only option is to surrender to global companies with lower labor costs." The hour that followed was the longest of Mike's life. He spent it walking through the factory, talking to the mentor-apprentice pairs whose futures hung in the balance of a boardroom discussion they couldn't influence. Jerry Martinez was training two new apprentices in precision measurement techniques. Dave Chen was developing a hydraulic diagnostics curriculum that could be used at manufacturing facilities across the country. Sarah and Amanda were documenting innovations that had emerged from the mentorship program, creating intellectual property that could generate revenue for years. These people had trusted Mike with their dreams and career aspirations. In a few minutes, he would learn whether that trust had been justified or whether he had led them into a dead end of corporate reorganization and cost reduction. At exactly 11:00 a.m., Mike was summoned back to the boardroom. The 12 directors sat around the mahogany table with expressions that revealed nothing about their decision. Chairman Hartwell held a document that would determine Atlantic Motors' future direction. "Mr. Thompson, Miss Sterling," Hartwell began, "the board has reached a decision regarding the workforce development program and Consolidated's acquisition offer." Mike felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Everything they had worked for, all the relationships built, knowledge transferred, and innovations developed hung in the balance of whatever words would come next. By a vote of 7-5, the board has approved the following resolution: Atlantic Motors will reject Consolidated's acquisition offer and proceed with the development of the Atlantic Motors Institute for Workforce Excellence. The words took a moment to register. Mike looked at Victoria, who was smiling for the first time in weeks. "Furthermore," Hartwell continued, "the board has approved funding for a comprehensive workforce development program. With Mike Thompson as director and Victoria Sterling as vice president of innovation, the initial budget is $12 million over 3 years, with additional funding contingent on meeting performance milestones." Director Chen stood up. "Mr. Thompson, I want to personally apologize for the board's initial skepticism. What you've accomplished here challenges everything we thought we knew about workforce development. The mentorship program isn't just good for workers, it's good for business." But Chairman Hartwell wasn't finished. "There are conditions. Mr. Thompson, the Department of Defense contract must be secured within 6 months. The intellectual property generated by mentor-apprentice pairs must demonstrate commercial viability within 18 months. And the Atlantic Motors Institute must achieve operational profitability within 3 years." "We understand," Mike replied. "We're prepared to be judged by results." "There's one more thing," Director Morrison said, pulling out another document. "The board has approved funding for educational partnerships with local universities. Students in the mentorship program will have access to degree programs that combine practical experience with academic credentials. Full tuition assistance for program participants." Mike thought about Sarah's MIT acceptance letter, still tucked in his wallet. "Does this include partnerships with institutions outside Michigan?" "It includes partnerships with any accredited institution that's willing to integrate practical manufacturing experience with traditional academic programs," Victoria replied. "Sarah could pursue aerospace engineering at MIT while spending summers working in advanced manufacturing facilities across the country. She gets both her dreams: academic excellence and meaningful work experience." As the board meeting concluded, Mike found himself holding an employment contract that reflected his transformation from invisible night shift mechanic to nationally recognized workforce development expert. The salary was more than he had ever dreamed of earning. But more importantly, The position gave him authority to implement mentorship programs that could affect thousands of workers across the country. But the most significant moment came when Amanda Sterling approached him as the directors filed out of the boardroom. "Mr. Thompson, there's something I need to tell you. Something my mother asked me not to mention until after the board vote." "What's that?" "Amanda, the Pentagon contacted us 3 weeks ago about the defense contractor training program, but they weren't just interested in Atlantic Motors. They were interested in you specifically." Mike stared at Amanda, not understanding the implications. Apparently, word of your diagnostic capabilities and the mentorship program had reached someone in the Department of Defense who understands that national security depends on maintaining industrial capabilities. They want you to develop training programs that will preserve American manufacturing knowledge for defense applications. Victoria joined the conversation, her expression mixing pride and concern. "Mike, the Pentagon representative was very clear about their assessment. They believe that America's ability to produce sophisticated defense systems depends on preserving the kind of institutional knowledge that companies like Consolidated are systematically eliminating." "What does that mean for the Atlantic Motors Institute?" "It means we're not just creating a workforce development program, we're contributing to national security by preserving industrial capabilities that are essential for American competitiveness." Victoria replied, "The mentorship program has implications that go far beyond our company or even our industry." As Mike absorbed this information, he realized that his decision to risk personal advancement for collective benefit had led to opportunities he could never have imagined. The invisible mechanic had become visible not by seeking recognition for himself, but by creating systems that recognize the value of knowledge and experience that companies typically overlooked. 6 months later, Mike Thompson stood in the lobby of the Atlantic Motors Institute for Workforce Excellence, watching busloads of apprentices and mentors arrive from manufacturing facilities across the Midwest. The 50,000 square foot facility hummed with activity as 200 mentor-apprentice pairs from 48 different companies prepared to begin a 2-week intensive program that would replicate and expand the knowledge transfer methodologies first developed in Atlantic Motors' humble night shift. The transformation was visible everywhere Mike looked. Jerry Martinez, now 65, led a team of precision machining instructors who were training mentors from companies in Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. His student, Maria Santos, now 19 and a certified precision specialist, worked alongside Jerry as an assistant instructor, demonstrating how apprentices could quickly become mentors themselves. Dave Chen had been promoted to regional coordinator for advanced manufacturing training, traveling to facilities throughout the Rust Belt to diagnose complex problems and train local mentor-apprentice pairs. His partnership with Marcus Williams had evolved into a comprehensive curriculum that combined traditional mechanical knowledge with cutting-edge diagnostic techniques. Sarah Thompson had thrived in ways that even Mike's optimistic expectations couldn't have predicted. Now 18, she was completing her freshman year at MIT through the Accelerated Partnership Program, studying aerospace engineering while maintaining her involvement in the Atlantic Motors Institute. Her senior thesis project would focus on incorporating mathematical modeling into traditional manufacturing diagnostics, a fusion of her mother's analytical legacy with her father's practical expertise. "Dad, you need to see this," Sarah said, approaching Mike with a tablet displaying the morning's news coverage. The headline read, "Atlantic Motors model reduces manufacturing training costs by 45% nationwide." The article highlighted the Department of Defense's interim report on the Workforce Development Initiative's first year. The statistics were impressive. 247 mentor-apprentice pairs established across 34 states, $8.7 million in documented cost savings, and a 91% retention rate among program participants. But the human impact was even more compelling. "Listen to this quote," Sarah continued, reading from the article. "The Atlantic Motors program didn't just teach me technical skills," says David Rodriguez, a 19-year-old apprentice at Boeing's Seattle facility. "It taught me that my ideas and observations have value, that experienced workers want to share their knowledge, and that I have something meaningful to contribute to American manufacturing." Mike smiled. recognizing the echo of his own transformation in David Rodriguez's words. The invisible mechanic who had once felt overlooked and undervalued had created a system that helped hundreds of other people discover their own worth and potential. Amanda Sterling, now a freshman at Northwestern University's engineering school, had continued documenting the program's expansion through a comprehensive research project that was attracting attention from business schools and government agencies. Her analysis of knowledge transfer methodologies had been published in the Harvard Business Review and was being used by the Department of Labor as a model for similar programs in other industries. Amanda's latest research shows something really interesting, Sarah said, advancing to a video presentation on her tablet. She's been following up with apprentices who completed the program 12 months ago. 94% are still employed in skilled positions. 71% have been promoted or received significant salary increases, and 23% have started their own businesses using knowledge and contacts they developed through the mentorship program. The success statistics were gratifying, but what pleased Mike most was the program's cultural impact. Companies that had initially viewed the mentorship initiative as a workforce development strategy were discovering that it transformed their entire approach to employee relations. Innovation and problem-solving, Victoria Sterling, now Senior Vice President of Workforce Innovation for Atlantic Motors and a nationally recognized expert on industrial education, entered the lobby carrying the document that had made this expansion possible. The Department of Defense contract, originally valued at $25 million over 5 years, had been renewed and expanded to $47 million based on the program's demonstrated success. Mike, have you seen the latest acquisition inquiries? Victoria asked, showing him a formal proposal from a European manufacturing consortium. Let me guess they want to license our workforce development expertise. They want to implement Atlantic Motors methodologies in manufacturing facilities across 23 countries. The initial contract would be worth $31 million over 4 years, with additional revenue streams from ongoing consulting and curriculum development. Mike studied the proposal, noting how different it was from the acquisition offers they had faced 2 years earlier. Instead of buying Atlantic Motors to control their intellectual property, international companies wanted to pay for access to knowledge that remained freely available through open-source documentation. What did you tell them? That our methodologies are freely available to anyone who wants to implement them. But if they want comprehensive consulting services, training support, and customized curriculum development, we're happy to provide that for appropriate compensation. This was the sustainable model they had hoped to achieve, making knowledge freely available while generating revenue from expertise and implementation support. Atlantic Motors had become profitable not by hoarding intellectual property, but by sharing it generously and helping others adapt it to their specific needs. As the afternoon training sessions began, Mike walked through the Institute's workshops and classrooms, observing mentor-apprentice pairs from dozens of different companies learning to work together. The scene was both familiar and extraordinary experienced workers patiently sharing knowledge with younger colleagues, creating relationships that would benefit both individuals and companies for years to come. In the precision machining workshop, a 61-year-old mentor from Ford was showing a 20-year-old apprentice from Tesla how to read the subtle vibrations that indicated tool wear. In the hydraulics laboratory, a grandmother from Caterpillar was teaching 3 college students from John Deere how to diagnose system problems by sound analysis. In the quality control classroom, a retired Air Force technician was demonstrating inspection techniques to a group of recent engineering graduates from various aerospace companies. The diversity was remarkable: gender, ethnicity, educational background, and life experience all blended together in service of knowledge transfer and mutual learning. The mentorship program had evolved far beyond Mike's original vision of preserving institutional knowledge. It had become a celebration of human potential and a demonstration that investing in people created value that couldn't be measured solely in financial terms. That evening, Mike joined Victoria, Sarah, and Amanda for dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Detroit skyline. The conversation naturally turned to the program's future and the challenges of sustainable growth. The Department of Defense wants to expand to all 50 states within 3 years, Victoria said. They're talking about involving 500 companies and 10,000 mentor-apprentice pairs. That's ambitious, Sarah replied. Do we have the infrastructure to support that kind of growth? We have something better than infrastructure, Mike said. We have a methodology that's designed to replicate itself. Every apprentice who completes the program becomes a potential mentor. Every company that implements the program becomes a training resource for other companies. Amanda looked up from her documentation notes. That's what makes this different from traditional corporate training programs. Instead of creating dependency on central resources, it creates distributed expertise that gets stronger as it spreads. The conversation was interrupted by Mike's phone, which displayed a call from Jerry Martinez. Jerry had been leading a training session for automotive suppliers in Kentucky. Mike, you're not going to believe this, Jerry said, his voice filled with excitement. Toyota wants to implement mentorship programs in all their North American facilities. They want to start with a pilot program for 500 mentor-apprentice pairs. That's incredible. Jerry, how did this happen? One of the suppliers we've been training had a quality problem that their engineers couldn't solve. The apprentice in their program, a kid named Jennifer, who's been learning from a 58-year-old welder, identified the issue in 12 minutes. Toyota's quality manager was so impressed that he wants to understand how mentorship programs can be integrated into large-scale manufacturing. After ending the call, Mike shared the news with the others. The expansion to major international manufacturers represented a quantum leap in the program's reach and impact. This is what we dreamed of, Victoria said. Proof that the mentorship model works at any scale, in any industry. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Sarah asked a question that had been on her mind throughout the evening. Dad, do you ever think about what Mom would say about all this? Mike considered the question carefully. I think she'd be proud that we found a way to help people while staying true to our values. She always believed that the best solutions were the ones that lifted everyone up instead of just helping yourself. She'd also be amazed at how far you've come, Sarah added, from night shift mechanic to national workforce development expert. The title changed, but the work is the same. Mike replied, it's still about listening to what people need, recognizing their potential, and creating opportunities for them to succeed. 2 years later, on a crisp spring morning, Mike stood before the largest audience of his life, 2,000 business leaders, government officials, and workforce development experts gathered for the National Manufacturing Summit in Washington, D.C. His presentation, titled The Human Factor, How Investing in Workers Creates Sustainable Competitive Advantage, would be broadcast live to manufacturing facilities across the country. The statistics he presented were impressive. The Atlantic Motors model had expanded to 47 states, involved 847 companies, and trained over 25,000 mentor-apprentice pairs. Participating companies reported average productivity improvements of 31%, reduced training costs of 44%, and employee retention rates that exceeded industry averages by 67%. But Mike concluded his presentation with the story that mattered most to him, the transformation of individuals who had discovered their own worth and potential through the simple act of sharing knowledge across generations. The mentorship program works, he said to the assembled audience, not because it's a sophisticated training methodology, but because it's based on a simple truth: every person has something valuable to teach, and every person has something important to learn. When we create systems that honor both sides of that equation, we unlock human potential that benefits everyone. As the audience rose in sustained applause, Mike caught sight of several familiar faces in the front row. Sarah, now 20 and serving as a student ambassador for the program while completing her aerospace engineering degree. Jerry Martinez, 67 and still training precision machinists while developing curriculum for international implementation. Maria Santos, 21 and now supervising her own team of apprentices while pursuing an engineering degree through the partnership program. Amanda Sterling, 20 and majoring in industrial engineering with a focus on workforce development, was documenting the presentation for her senior thesis on knowledge transfer systems. Her research had evolved into a comprehensive analysis of how mentorship programs could be adapted for different industries and cultural contexts. But perhaps the most significant presence in the audience was Victoria Sterling, who had been selected to lead the newly created Department of Labor's Office of Advanced Manufacturing Workforce Development. Her appointment represented federal recognition that the Atlantic Motors model had implications far beyond individual companies or industries. During the question and answer session that followed Mike's presentation, a representative from the German Ministry of Economic Affairs asked about international collaboration on workforce development initiatives. Mr. Thompson, Germany has been implementing apprenticeship programs for decades, but we're interested in your approach to knowledge transfer between experienced workers and new apprentices. Would Atlantic Motors be interested in developing joint training programs that combine German systematic approaches with American innovation methodologies? Mike looked at Victoria, who nodded encouragingly. We'd be very interested in international collaboration. The challenges facing manufacturing workers are global, and the solutions should be global as well. A representative from the Chinese Ministry of Industry raised another question. Mr. Thompson, China is transitioning from low-cost manufacturing to high-value production. We're struggling to develop the kind of institutional knowledge that American and German companies have built over decades. Could the Atlantic Motors model be adapted for rapidly developing manufacturing sectors? The mentorship model is specifically designed to accelerate knowledge transfer, Mike replied. Instead of waiting decades for workers to develop expertise through trial and error, structured mentorship programs can transfer proven knowledge in months while encouraging innovation and adaptation. As the presentation concluded, Mike found himself surrounded by representatives from companies, government agencies, and educational institutions who wanted to implement similar programs. The invisible mechanic had become a global spokesperson for the value of human knowledge and experience in an age of automation and artificial intelligence. But the most meaningful moment came during a private conversation with a young woman who approached him after the formal session ended. Mr. Thompson, my name is Lisa Chen. I'm a 19-year-old apprentice at Boeing's Charleston facility. 6 months ago, I was working at a fast food restaurant with no prospects for skilled employment. Today, I'm learning advanced composite manufacturing from a mentor who has 35 years of aerospace experience. I wanted to thank you for creating opportunities that people like me never thought were possible. Mike looked at Lisa Chen, seeing in her face the same mixture of determination and hope that he remembered from his own early days at Atlantic Motors. Lisa, you don't need to thank me. You earned your opportunity through your willingness to learn and your commitment to excellence. The mentorship program just created a pathway. You're the one walking it. But without the program, the pathway wouldn't exist. Lisa replied, I've learned that my ideas and questions have value, that experienced workers want to share their knowledge, and that I can contribute to something larger than myself. As Mike traveled back to Detroit that evening, he reflected on the journey that had brought him from invisible night shift mechanic to national leader in workforce development. The transformation hadn't happened because he sought recognition or advancement. It had happened because he recognized that individual success was meaningless unless it created opportunities for others to succeed as well. Sarah met him at the airport, carrying news that would define the next chapter of their story. Dad, I've been accepted to a doctoral program at Stanford, but I've also been offered a position developing workforce programs for NASA's Artemis project. I can't decide which opportunity would have more impact. Mike looked at his daughter, amazed by how far she had traveled from the trailer park girl who had worried about college tuition. What does your heart tell you? That the most important work happens when you combine theoretical knowledge with practical application. NASA's offer would let me help develop training programs for the next generation of space exploration while continuing my research into advanced manufacturing processes. Then that's your answer, Mike said. Your mother always said that the best decisions are the ones that help you grow while helping others achieve their potential. 6 months later, Mike Thompson stood in the newly expanded Atlantic Motors Institute, watching a group of NASA engineers learn precision manufacturing techniques from Jerry Martinez and his team of master craftsmen. The site represented everything the mentorship program had been designed to achieve: the transfer of irreplaceable human knowledge in service of goals that no individual could accomplish alone. The space program training contract was worth $15 million over 3 years, but its real value lay in preserving manufacturing capabilities that would be essential for America's return to the moon and eventual exploration of Mars. The invisible mechanic had helped create a system that would literally reach for the stars. As Mike walked through the Institute's corridors, he passed photographs documenting the program's evolution images of mentor-apprentice pairs working together, innovations they had developed, and success stories that had emerged from their collaboration. But the image that meant the most to him was a simple photograph of his original night shift crew, taken on the day he had first proposed the mentorship program. Jerry Martinez, Dave Chen, and the others looked tired in that photograph, worn down by years of invisible work and uncertain futures. Today, those same men were recognized as national experts in their fields, traveling to manufacturing facilities across the country to share knowledge that companies had once taken for granted. The transformation hadn't just changed their careers, it had validated their life's work and given them purpose that extended far beyond their individual circumstances. Mike's phone buzzed with a text message from Victoria Sterling, who was in Washington meeting with Department of Defense officials about expanding workforce development programs to aerospace and defense contractors. Mike just got approval for $85 million expansion of mentorship programs to defense industry. Congressional subcommittee wants you to testify about workforce development and national security next month. The invisible mechanic is about to become very visible on C-SPAN. Mike smiled, understanding that his journey from night shift anonymity to national recognition had led him to opportunities he could never have imagined. But the real satisfaction came from knowing that thousands of other people experienced workers who had felt obsolete. Young people who had thought skilled careers were beyond their reach were discovering their own potential through systems that honored both knowledge and learning. The Atlantic Motors Institute for Workforce Excellence had become more than a training facility. It had become proof that American manufacturing could compete not through cost reduction or automation alone, but through the patient cultivation of human expertise and innovation. As evening fell over Detroit, Mike Thompson prepared to drive home to the small house he now shared with Sarah during her breaks from Stanford. The trailer park was behind them, but the values they had learned there, the importance of hard work, the power of education, and the responsibility to help others achieve their dreams, remained at the center of everything they did. The invisible man had become visible by making others visible. The mechanic who had once worried about paying for his daughter's college education had created a system that provided opportunities for thousands of young people to pursue meaningful careers. The widower who had been afraid to move forward with his life had built something that honored his wife's memory, while embracing a future filled with possibility. In the end, Mike Thompson had learned that the most powerful transformations weren't the ones that changed your title or salary. They were the ones that changed how you thought about your responsibility to others. The mentorship program had taught him that success wasn't about individual achievement. It was about creating conditions where everyone could achieve their potential, and perhaps most importantly, he had discovered that the greatest legacy wasn't what you accomplished for yourself, but what you made possible for others to accomplish. The invisible mechanic had helped create a system that would continue long after he was gone, preserving and transferring human knowledge in service of dreams that hadn't even been imagined yet. The Atlantic Motors Institute's mission statement, displayed prominently in the main lobby, captured the philosophy that had guided Mike's journey from night shift obscurity to national recognition. Every person has something valuable to teach. Every person has something important to learn. Every company succeeds when it honors both truths. As Mike drove through the streets of Detroit, past the abandoned factories that told stories of industrial decline and the new facilities that represented manufacturing's resurrection, he carried with him the knowledge that change was possible when people chose to invest in each other, rather than just in themselves. The invisible man had been seen, and in being seen, he had helped others discover that they too had value, potential, and contributions that the world needed in an age of automation and globalization. Mike Thompson had proven that the most important technology was still the human capacity to learn, teach, and grow together. The mentorship program would continue to expand, reaching new industries and new countries. But its foundation would always be the simple truth that Mike had learned during those long night shifts at Atlantic Motors, that the most profound changes happen not when you climb the ladder of success, but when you build more ladders for others to climb. The invisible mechanic's greatest achievement wasn't becoming visible. It was creating a world where everyone's contributions could be seen, valued, and developed to their fullest potential. Mike Thompson never got that corner office or the executive parking space. He never made the cover of Forbes or rang the opening bell on Wall Street, but on quiet evenings, when he drives through the streets of Detroit, he passes something far more valuable than any corporate trophy. He passes the Atlantic Motors Institute, where the lights burn bright with mentor-apprentice pairs working late into the night. He passes young people who once thought skilled careers were beyond their reach, now teaching the next generation. He passes Jerry Martinez, still at 67, sharing 4 decades of wisdom with eager hands and hungry minds. The invisible mechanic learned something that no business school teaches, that true success isn't measured by how high you climb, but by how many ladders you build for others. That the most powerful transformations happen not when you escape your circumstances, but when you transform them for everyone around you. Linda would have been proud. Sarah did make it to MIT and then to NASA. And somewhere tonight, in factories across America, experienced workers are sitting down with young apprentices, sharing knowledge that took a lifetime to earn. The question isn't whether you'll be remembered. The question is, what will you make possible for the person standing behind you, waiting for their chance to be seen? What legacy are you building in the work you do every day?